She sits at a dressing table that once belonged to a different century. Oval mirror, milk glass bulbs, a comb with a single gold tooth missing. The room is quiet in the way only backstage rooms are quiet. Heavy velvet silence, dust motes turning in the lamplight like snow that lost its way. 84 years have taught her how to make an entrance, how to command oxygen, how to leave a room colder than she found it. But they have also taught her this: the light always goes first. It withdraws by degrees, like a tide that refuses to announce itself. Faye lifts her chin toward the mirror and studies the face that carried cinema on its cheekbones, the mouth that sharpened lines into legend. Somewhere in the glass, Bonnie is still laughing from the passenger seat, wild and doomed. Somewhere in the glass, a television studio in 1976 holds its breath as Diana Christensen smiles, a shark's smile, and wins an Oscar for it. Somewhere in the glass, 1,000 newspaper snapshots flicker and are gone. The bulbs around the mirror burn low, and her reflection loosens, soft at the edges, like a star losing gravity. The old photographs on the table are not framed. Framing would admit that the past is furniture. Instead, they're stacked, slippery with fingerprints, a shuffled deck of lives. Here she is on a wind-bent plane with Warren, squinting into the sun, the myth of American outlawry blasting through the lens. Here she is in a satin blouse, eyes like polished stones, accepting the Academy Award while another woman inside her counts heartbeats. Here she is in the armor of Joan Crawford, her features forged into someone else's legend, daring audiences to look away. Every picture carries a heat signature, and even now her fingertips find it, the way a pianist finds middle C in the dark. What happens to a woman who is both mask and mirror? For years, the answer was simple. You watch. You calculate. You choose. Faye learned early that Hollywood is not a place but a geometry problem. You study angles, you subtract the wasted light, you add the danger. She mastered it the way only the most serious players do, with fierce attention and a refusal to be small. The camera cold, impartial, a predator that never blinks found in her something it could not convert to wallpaper. She was flint, and the lens struck sparks. People said she was exacting. Some said impossible. The adjectives cling to her like sequins, glitter that cuts. Yet, none of those words encompass the secret compact she made with the work. Give me your terror, your ambition, your shame, and I will build you a cathedral of moments so precise that Time itself will hesitate at the door. But Time does not hesitate forever. It advances in practical shoes. The calls thin out. The rooms become smaller. The compliments mutate into eulogies without the courtesy of a funeral. She knows the industry's grammar and can hear the tense change. From is to was, from will to would have. There is no tragedy in growing older that belongs to another genre. The tragedy is in the way the world insists on reading your face like a calendar. A line around the mouth becomes a date stamp. A tremor becomes a footnote. And yet, when she walks across a stage, there is still an intake of breath, still a reminder that certain presences were calibrated in another era and cannot be recalibrated now. Tonight is not an awards show and not a set. It is a charity gala that smells of peonies and promises. Young actors thread through the crowd with the bright, desperate grace of new planets. They orbit power, heat, rumor. When they notice her, their eyes change. Some widen, some narrow. A few soften into gratitude like candles. She smiles, and the smile is a lesson in control. There is nothing fragile in it. She speaks carefully, the way one does when one has been quoted for half a century. She has learned how a misheard syllable can turn into a headline. She has learned how opinion calcifies into biography. She has learned that in this town, memory is a room people leave without turning off the light. Later, in the car, The city drifts by in mirrored panes. Palm trees like punctuation, billboards that stare back, the hard glitter of Beverly Hills refusing to blink. She closes her eyes and hears film stock feeding through a camera somewhere, miles and decades away, that soft mechanical purr that used to be the sound of destiny. It returns as a physical sensation, the way a mark on the floor could feel like a promise, the way a director's raised hand could rearrange the weather. She remembers the first time someone wrote that her presence was icy, as if temperature could be proof of character. She remembers the first time difficult traveled faster than her, and arrived on set like a bouquet nobody wanted to climb. The truth was never so tidy. Precision is not cruelty. Knowing what you want is not sin. If a man snaps the world into focus, they call it vision. When a woman does it, the word is sharper. The driver asks, "Home?" and she nods. The house greets her with the small, consoling sounds of old wood, settling, remembering. On the piano, the sheet music for a song she once tried to learn droops like a late flower. She sits and touches the keys without pressing them, as if sound could bruise. The room holds its breath. A single award statue on the mantel glints, immodest, permanent. Proof that at least one night in the 20th century, the universe admitted what her work had done to it. She has never been nostalgic about glory. Nostalgia is an anesthetic, and the roles demanded pain. But there are nights when the past stands very close, and she can feel its temperature rise against her back like a stage door at intermission. She makes tea, the way people who know hotels make tea absent-mindedly exact. The kettle clicks. Steam ribbons upward and dissolves. She drinks, and with the first swallow, some private curtain lifts. There is a rumor that great stars do not feel loneliness because attention can be confused for company. The rumor is wrong. The more people have looked at her, the more she has had to hide. Fame is a room with windows on every wall. You learn to sit very still so that the silhouettes don't move. Isolated? Sometimes. Regretful? No. Regret implies the power to return and fix the angle. She is not interested in reruns. She is interested in truth, which is abrasive and luminous in equal measure. On her desk, an unopened script waits. It arrived tied with ribbon, as if to apologize for its timing. She has read enough first pages to recognize hunger in a paragraph, cowardice in a line break. She unties it and begins. The role is a woman marked by TMA, but not reduced by it. There is a scene where she refuses to apologize for the damage she caused by being fully herself. There is another where she takes off her jewelry, and with it, a century's worth of assumptions. Faye smiles small, involuntary. The young writer who sent this believes in resurrection, and why not? Hollywood has always been a church that keeps its miracle stories in development hell. At the window, the night finally remembers how to be silent. She watches her own reflection rest against the city's lights, a double exposure of then and now. In the distance, sirens stitch two neighborhoods together. She thinks about the girls who come here every year, straight-backed with hope, carrying entire futures in a single suitcase, ready to rent themselves to the myth. She thinks about the women who stay, who invent and reinvent, who pay in bone and TMA, and the thin, unglamorous currency of stubbornness. The industry will say what it always says, that it made you. The truth is less flattering and more accurate. It met you. It tested the welds. It tried to swallow you whole. It failed. The tea has gone cold. She closes the script on her lap and lets the silence return to its work. Tomorrow there will be more photographs to sign, more questions that ask for the perfect verb tense. Tomorrow there will be people who love her for what she did to their youth, and people who resent her for refusing to be small in theirs. Tomorrow there may be a rehearsal, or not, a reading, or not. The tragedy is not that Time moves. It is that the world mistakes movement for erasure. Yet here she is undiminished by statistics, complicated by truth, carrying both the crown and its bruise. When she finally turns off the mirror lights and the room folds itself into dark, it is not an ending. It is an actress saving the wattage for the next scene, the next line, the next proof that a life devoted to precision can still pierce the present and make it feel like first light. The morning is quieter than it used to be. Once, the telephone never stopped, its metallic trill, carrying news of projects, dinners, offers, and sometimes threats, disguised as opportunities. Now it rests obediently on the desk, a sentinel without orders. Faye moves through the house like a figure rehearsing in slow motion, her bare feet whispering against Persian rugs that once cushioned the steps of parties legendary enough to fuel a dozen memoirs. Every corner of her home is a gallery of triumph and warning. Film posters line the walls, Bonnie and Clyde, Network, Chinatown, each one a fossilized explosion. Proof that at least once she had set Hollywood on fire. The world outside still recognizes the face, but not with the same electricity. Strangers whisper, "That's her," and the words carry awe braided with pity, as though greatness has an expiration date. She feels it most when young reporters approach her with trembling notepads. Their questions are not about the craft, but about survival. How does it feel to age in an industry that worships youth? Did she regret the feuds? The infamous reputation for being difficult? Behind their polite tones lies a hunger for confession, a demand for surrender. But surrender is not in her vocabulary. It never was. From the very beginning, Faye understood that Hollywood was a game of subtraction. For a woman, beauty was currency, and to spend it too quickly was to be discarded. Precision kept her alive. She studied scripts with the vigilance of a surgeon, dissecting each line until it bled meaning. Directors both admired and feared her. Colleagues whispered. To some, she was a tyrant. To others, a savior who dragged scenes into brilliance by force of will. The truth, she knows, lies between those extremes. She was never cruel for sport, but for survival. She could not afford mediocrity because mediocrity was a coffin. Yet, the same ferocity that carved her legend also carved her exile. Whispers hardened into reputation. Reputation into verdict. Roles dwindled not because the talent dimmed, but because the industry punishes women who dare to wield their genius like a weapon. Men were permitted eccentricity. Women were accused of hysteria. She carried those double standards like invisible bruises, smiling through interviews while absorbing the sting of headlines that read more like autopsies than profiles. Now, at 84, she revisits those scars with a strange tenderness. The wounds that once bled indignation have settled into quiet maps of where she has been. She reads them the way others read novels, not for comfort, but for recognition. She thinks of Joan Crawford, a ghost she embodied so convincingly that audiences forgot who was who. Crawford's shadow follows her even now, whispering reminders of what it costs to give everything to an industry that only loves you until it doesn't. She sits at the grand piano in the living room, though she never truly mastered the instrument. The ivory keys glisten like a row of waiting eyes. She presses one, then another, and the sound is thin but clear, like memory insisting on being heard. In that fragile melody, she hears the applause of 1,000 nights, the gasp of audiences meeting Bonnie Parker for the first T.E. the collective intake of breath when she strode into Network with eyes like razors. Applause is addictive. It lingers long after the theater empties, echoing in the bones, demanding repetition. But now, the echo is faint, and she wonders if silence is not the greater addiction. The housekeeper enters softly, placing a breakfast tray by the window. Fresh fruit, tea, nothing heavy. Faye thanks her with a nod, preferring to conserve her voice. The woman lingers, perhaps hoping for conversation, but Faye is already elsewhere, lost in the memory of red carpets that stretched like arteries beneath her heels. She remembers how photographers shouted her name, desperate to steal fragments of her soul in bursts of light. At the time, she resented it, the constant invasion. Now, she almost misses it, the evidence that she once belonged to the mythology of cinema, that her existence was an event. When the house is empty again, she opens a leather-bound journal. Inside are fragments, notations, moments too sharp to trust to memory alone. One entry reads, "Greatness is not what they remember you for, but what they will never know you gave up to get there." Another, "They wanted me soft. I gave them steel. They wanted me grateful. I gave them truth. They called it arrogance. I called it breath." Her handwriting trembles now, the lines less controlled, but the words retain their bite. She writes, not for an audience, but for survival, as though each sentence is another stitch keeping her together. There is comfort in the ritual, even when the pages remind her of battles that no one applauded. Afternoon arrives with its golden haze, and she steps onto the balcony. Los Angeles sprawls below, indifferent and shimmering. This city has a cruel memory. It forgets legends the moment new ones are born. Yet, watching the skyline, she does not feel erased. She feels like a ghost haunting her own myth, a reminder that glory is not permanent, but neither is it entirely lost. Somewhere, in film reels preserved in archives, she is still 28, still luminous, still dangerous. The camera does not forgive, but it also does not forget. As twilight seeps into the room, she lights a single candle. The flame wavers, small but unyielding, and she recognizes herself in it. Faye Dunaway, not extinguished, not erased, simply burning in a register the world no longer knows how to see. And as the night gathers, she whispers the one truth the industry never managed to take from her. I was never theirs. I was always mine. The house, when it empties of voices, breathes with its own kind of loneliness. At night, silence moves through the halls like an uninvited guest, pausing at doorways, brushing against the gilt frames of photographs. Faye has always understood that silence is the price of greatness. The applause ends, the lights fade, and what remains is the echo of your own footsteps in a room too large for one person. Yet this silence has a sharper edge. It slices into memory, forcing her to confront the private fractures that the public never saw. The cost of becoming a monument while still alive. Faye's relationships have long been the subject of curiosity. Sometimes ridicule, often judgment. Lovers came and went, drawn first to the radiance of her beauty, then repelled by the intensity of her fire. To love her was to love a flame. It illuminated, but it also burned. Her marriage to Peter Wolf, the musician with wild hair and wilder nights, was brief, more a collision than a union. Their worlds overlapped for a TMA, his drenched in rock and rebellion, hers in film sets and discipline, but they could not sustain each other. Hollywood treated their breakup as spectacle, another headline to devour. Faye treated it as survival. She had learned early that a woman who lingered in heartbreak was a woman who surrendered her career. Then came the long, complicated affair with Marcello Mastroianni, the Italian screen legend whose gaze carried both melancholy and mischief. With him, she felt something close to freedom. Stolen afternoons in Rome, laughter spilling like wine, the sensation of being seen not as a star, but as a woman. Yet even this love story fractured under the weight of his marriage and the impossibility of permanence. When he returned to his family, Faye did what she had always done, folded the grief into her work, wore it like a hidden costume, transformed pain into art. But in the quiet hours, the loss pressed against her ribs like an old injury. Motherhood, too, was never simple. Her son, Liam, was born at a time when Faye was fighting both the industry and herself. She loved him with a ferocity she could not always articulate. But the demands of career and the chaos of reputation often cast shadows over their bond. The press, hungry for scandal, twisted even her maternal instincts into accusations of vanity or neglect. Faye knew better. But the sting of those headlines lingered. She was a woman who had conquered the world, yet sometimes felt powerless in the most intimate role of all. The industry, merciless in its hunger for youth, began to retreat from her. By the 1990s, roles diminished, not because her skill had eroded, but because Hollywood had decided she no longer belonged in the stories it wanted to tell. Directors whispered about her temper, producers recoiled from her demands, and soon the once unthinkable happened. Scripts stopped arriving. She found herself exiled not for lack of talent, but for refusing to be docile. It was a punishment disguised as inevitability, and it cut deeper than any review. Yet she was not innocent of her own myth-making. On set, she demanded perfection, and when perfection did not arrive, she created chaos to summon it. Crew members remembered the fury, the sharp words, the refusal to compromise, but what they rarely saw was the woman backstage, hands trembling from the weight of expectation, terrified that one false note would expose her as less than the legend the world believed her to be. The mask of arrogance was armor. Beneath it lived a fear as fragile as glass. Her portrayal of Joan Crawford in Mommy Dearest became a curse she never escaped. The film, ridiculed at first, later became a cult phenomenon, but for Faye, it was a wound that never closed. Audiences blurred the lines between actress and character, mistaking her ferocious performance for confession. In interviews, she bristled whenever the subject arose, insisting that the film's excess was the fault of direction, editing, anything but her. Yet, in the solitude of night, she could not silence the question. Had she gone too far? Or had she simply been too convincing? The tragedy was not in the performance itself, but in how it eclipsed so much of her other work, reducing a career of brilliance to a single, grotesque caricature. In recent years, whispers of illness have followed her. Health, once taken for granted, now requires negotiation. Some days are strong, others less so. She guards her privacy fiercely, but the body betrays what the face still fights to conceal. The hand that once held cigarettes with lethal glamour sometimes shakes. The voice that once commanded stages occasionally wavers. The tragedy is not in weakness itself, but in the knowledge that the world is watching for it, eager to turn decline into spectacle. And yet, despite the pain, there remains a resilience in her. She attends galas, sometimes readings, still dressed with elegance, still carrying herself as though every camera is a loyal disciple. She has never learned how to be small, and perhaps that is her salvation. Even in solitude, even in silence, she insists on the dignity of presence. Her tragedies do not erase her triumphs, they exist alongside them, like shadows at the edge of light. As the evening deepens, Faye lights another candle. The flame quivers, but holds. She studies it, seeing in its stubborn glow the reflection of her own journey. Brilliant, volatile, misunderstood, but unextinguished. Fame, love, motherhood, exile, each has carved its mark upon her, but none have destroyed her. She remains, if nothing else, a survivor of her own legend. The city outside her window moves with a rhythm that no longer belongs to her. Neon burns, cars hum, young actors stagger out of casting calls, rehearsing lines that feel like lifelines. Hollywood renews itself endlessly, a serpent shedding skins, and Faye Dunaway is forced to watch from a distance as though she were a ghost haunting the boulevards she once ruled. Fame, she knows, is not lost in an instant. It erodes, quietly, like stone beneath rain. In these twilight years, the struggle is not against rivals or critics, but against Time itself. Each morning arrives with reminders, stiff joints, a tremor in her hands, the betrayal of a mirror that shows more past than future. Once, the world measured her in opening weekends and award ceremonies. Now, it measures her in survival. Another birthday passed, another public appearance endured. She wonders if this is the true curse of stardom, not the ascent, but the long, slow descent, when no one tells you how to be legendary in decline. Loneliness seeps into the walls of her home like damp. She has acquaintances, admirers, even friends who call, but intimacy is scarce. Many of those she once loved are gone. Co-stars buried, lovers faded into obituaries, rivals turned into footnotes. The faces that once shared her spotlight are now photographs in archives, their voices trapped in reels of celluloid. So many times, while sifting through her old press clippings, she feels as though she is curating a museum dedicated to someone else's life. And yet, the world occasionally beckons her back into its glare. A festival invites her to accept a Lifetime Achievement Award. A young director insists on meeting her, eager to harness the myth for one final project. She attends, dressed immaculately, smile rehearsed, eyes still sharp. The applause rises, polite but distant, and she feels both cherished and embalmed. They are honoring a relic, not a woman. She returns home exhausted, the echoes of clapping hands hollow in her ears. The press continues to circle, vulture-like, with its fascination for tragedy. Rumors of failing health, whispers of eccentric behavior, stories that collapse her decades of brilliance into a single headline: Fallen Star. It is not cruelty so much as habit. Hollywood consumes its legends twice, once on the way up, once on the way down. Faye reads these accounts with the detachment of someone who has been dissected for too long to still bleed from the knife. Yet deep down, there is a sting, the reminder that public memory rarely grants women the dignity of complexity. Her greatest fear, unspoken but constant, is irrelevance. To be forgotten is worse than to be hated. She recalls the hunger in her 20s, the fire that drove her to inhabit roles with ferocity, to demand excellence at any cost. That hunger still lives in her bones, but the industry no longer answers it. Scripts gather dust, agents stop calling, and the silence that once meant rest now means exile. She has become what every star dreads, a cautionary tale whispered in casting rooms. Yet, amid the grief of fading, she finds moments of strange grace. Sitting in her garden at dusk, she watches the light fracture across the leaves and thinks of how many lives she has lived through characters. She remembers the thrill of Bonnie's laughter in the face of death, the cold determination of Diana Christensen, the haunted majesty of Joan Crawford. These roles are not just performances, they are fragments of her soul captured forever. The world may try to forget, but film does not. Somewhere, on screens small and large, she is still alive, still dangerous, still unforgettable. There is, too, the complicated solace of her son. Their relationship, scarred by absence and misunderstanding, is not simple, but in his presence, she sees continuity, the reminder that she is not entirely alone. He carries pieces of her, both visible and invisible, into a future she cannot follow. In Chaim, there is both regret and redemption, the proof that even amid chaos, she left behind something more lasting than fame. As night falls, she moves through her home, turning off lights one by one. The silence presses close, but she no longer resists it. She has begun to see in it a kind of truth, the unadorned reality that fame was always a borrowed flame, never meant to burn forever. What remains is not the glitter of premieres or the bitterness of feuds, but the stubborn fact that she endured. She outlasted critics, outlasted scandals, outlasted the very industry that once tried to bury her alive. And perhaps that endurance is its own form of victory. She cannot return to the fevered glow of her prime, but she can stand in the twilight with her spine unbowed, a reminder that tragedy does not erase triumph. The world may whisper of decline, but she whispers back with the authority of a woman who once commanded silence on sound stages, "I am still here." The candle burns low beside her, throwing shadows that dance like old memories on the wall. She leans back, eyes heavy, listening to the city beyond. Hollywood has already chosen its new darlings, already begun writing obituaries for stars who are still alive. But in this room, in this moment, Faye Dunaway holds her own narrative, fierce and fragile. The twilight may be heavy, but it is also hers to carry. Legacy is not a word Faye ever chased, though it has been attached to her name for decades. In her younger years, she thought only of the next role, the next script, the next opportunity to tear something out of herself and offer it to the camera. But now, in the stillness of her later years, legacy presses against her like an uninvited companion. It lingers in every headline that frames her as an icon, in every retrospective screening where audiences gasp at the ferocity of her youth. Even when critics reduce her life to controversy, they cannot erase the impact of her work. Legacy, she realizes, is not chosen. It is imposed. Her body of work is a gallery of contradictions. In Bonnie and Clyde, she embodied the reckless romance of crime, igniting a cultural revolution that redefined Hollywood in the 1960s. She was dangerous and intoxicating, a vision of rebellion wrapped in silk. That role alone would have immortalized her, but she refused to stop there. In Chinatown, she became Evelyn Mulray, fragile yet steely, her performance etched with mystery and sorrow. And in Network, she gave audiences Diana Christensen, the ruthless television executive who devoured humanity in pursuit of ratings. The role won her the Academy Award, but more than that, it seared itself into cultural memory as a prophecy of modern media. What binds these performances is not glamour, but truth. Faye dug beneath the surface of beauty to expose something raw, something dangerous. Audiences may have loved or loathed her characters, but they never dismissed them. They carried weight, they left marks, and that, she knows, is the rarest gift an actor can give. She has not merely entertained. She has unsettled, provoked, haunted. Critics have often painted her legacy with two brushes: brilliance and difficulty. The former they admit with reverence. The latter they whisper like a curse. But with Time, even those whispers have begun to shift. Younger generations of actors, especially women, see her not as a tyrant, but as a pioneer who demanded respect in an industry that preferred women to be silent. In interviews, rising stars speak of studying her performances, of finding in her precision a permission to be unapologetically fierce. To them, difficult has transformed into a synonym for uncompromising. The narrative is not yet rewritten, but it is in motion. Her influence stretches beyond film. In an age when celebrity is fleeting, when fame is measured in clicks and viral moments, Faye's career is a reminder of permanence. TikTok clips of her younger roles circulate among teenagers who were not alive when those films premiered. They marvel at her intensity, her style, her refusal to dilute herself. In a strange twist of fate, digital culture has resurrected her image, ensuring that even in obscurity, she cannot be forgotten. The world moves on, but fragments of her live on in pixels and celluloid, endlessly replayed. Yet legacy is also a burden. It reduces her to symbols: the ice queen, the perfectionist, the diva. It ignores the quiet moments: the mother reading to her son, the woman sitting alone with tea, the artist trembling before a difficult scene. Faye knows this is inevitable. History does not record tenderness. It records spectacle. But she cannot help but ache for the parts of herself that will never be remembered. The private self that never belonged to the audience. Perhaps that is the final tragedy of fame. You give so much of yourself to the world that the pieces left behind are too few to build a home. Still, she is not bitter. In the quiet, she has learned to measure her life not by what was taken, but by what remains. And what remains is undeniable. No film class is complete without Bonnie and Clyde. No discussion of media satire excludes Network. No conversation about neo-noir dares forget Chinatown. Her face, her voice, her choices, they are embedded in the DNA of cinema. To be studied is to be immortal, even if immortality is lonely. In recent years, invitations have trickled in for retrospectives and tributes. She attends when she can, walking into theaters where her younger self flickers on the screen. The audiences gasp, laugh, sometimes cry, as though encountering her for the first TMA. Watching them, she feels a bittersweet divide. She is both the woman in the chair and the woman on the screen, separated by decades, but bound by the permanence of art. It is strange, almost surreal, to outlive your own myth, and to sit in the dark beside strangers who adore a version of you that no longer exists. Faye's legacy, she realizes, is not in the perfection of her life, but in the imperfection of her truth. She was not always kind, not always gentle, not always easy, but she was real. She demanded more from herself, from her colleagues, from the industry, than it was willing to give. That demand carved both her triumphs and her tragedies. And perhaps that is the essence of her story. Brilliance cannot be tidy, nor can it be safe. It is jagged, it is ruthless, it is alive. On her mantle, the Oscar gleams, its gold surface catching the candlelight. But beside it, in a drawer, are stacks of handwritten notes, lines she rewrote, emotions she dissected, fragments of characters that never made it to screen. These, more than the statue, are her true testament. They reveal the work, the obsession, the relentless pursuit of authenticity. Long after the applause fades, the work remains, unflinching, undeniable. As she sits in the fading glow of evening, Faye allows herself a rare smile, not of arrogance, not of defiance, but of recognition. She has been both celebrated and condemned, loved and reviled, remembered and forgotten, and through it all, she remained herself, relentless, precise, unforgettable. The world may write her story as tragedy, but she knows better. Her legacy is not sorrow, it is fire. And fire, once lit, refuses to die. Public perception is a mirror that distorts, a surface polished by gossip and fingerprints, reflecting fragments of truth, but never the whole. For Faye Dunaway, the world's gaze has been both crown and shackle. Even now, as she retreats into the quiet of her later years, the fascination remains. Journalists continue to circle, eager to write one last headline that can pin her down like a butterfly beneath glass. Fans, meanwhile, argue across digital platforms, debating whether she was an artist of genius or a cautionary tale of ego unchecked. The truth, as always, lies in the tension between those extremes. For younger generations, who encounter her through streaming libraries or film studies, she is a revelation. They see Bonnie and Clyde not as history, but as prophecy, a film that shattered conventions, a performance that injected chaos into a complacent Hollywood. They see Network as eerily current, its satire of media more relevant in the age of viral outrage than it ever was in 1976. To them, Faye Dunaway is not a relic, but a prophetess, who foresaw the hunger, the cruelty, and the absurdity of spectacle culture. They post clips of her, meme her icy glares, and in doing so, resurrect her for an audience that never sat in a 1970s cinema. But to her contemporaries, the conversation is more complicated. Old co-stars, when interviewed, sometimes hesitate before speaking her name. Some recall brilliance, discipline, a presence that electrified sets. Others recall tension, battles of will, explosions of temper. The word difficult still hovers, a ghost refusing to leave. Yet, even critics admit that the work itself cannot be denied. Timé has a way of sanding down grudges, and what remains are the film's unforgiving, immortal, undeniable. In Hollywood circles, whispers of her current state travel like wildfire. The ambiguity itself feeds the myth. Is she diminished, or has she simply chosen to step away? Every public appearance, rare though it is, becomes an event, dissected in tabloids, magnified across social media. Photos of her attending a gala spark waves of commentary. Praise for her elegance, sorrow for her age, speculation about her health. Even in decline, she cannot escape the spotlight. Even in absence, she cannot escape the narrative machine that once made her. For fans who grew up with her, the emotions are sharper. They remember her not as a character, but as a milestone in their own lives. The night they first saw Chinatown and were struck by Evelyn Mulwray's tragic fragility, the moment they watched Network and realized that television could devour the soul. To them, Faye is more than an actress. She is memory incarnate. Watching her fade is like watching their own youth vanish, and that makes the tragedy personal. Cultural critics, in their essays and retrospectives, continue to grapple with her contradictions. Some frame her as a feminist icon ahead of her Timé, a woman who demanded agency in an industry that punished female ambition. Others cast her as emblematic of Hollywood's darker excesses, proof that genius and self-destruction often share the same bloodstream. The debate itself ensures her immortality. So long as she can spark discourse, she is not forgotten. And then there are the obituaries in waiting. It is a cruel reality of fame that newspapers prepare the words of your departure long before you leave. Somewhere, in digital archives, drafts already exist. Oscar-winning actress Faye Dunaway, remembered for Bonnie and Clyde and Network, has died at. These premature epitaphs are a reminder that the world anticipates her absence as much as it once anticipated her performances. It is both chilling and oddly flattering. The certainty that her death will be news, that her departure will ripple across screens and headlines. Few lives warrant such preparation. But Faye is not yet gone, and she resents the world's eagerness to write her ending. She insists, in her interviews, that she is still working, still searching for roles, still alive in the marrow of her craft. Whether or not those opportunities materialize is irrelevant. The defiance itself is her final performance. She refuses to let others dictate her bow. Among fans and critics alike, one question lingers. How will she ultimately be remembered? As the luminous beauty who redefined an era? As the uncompromising artist who sacrificed kindness for truth? As the diva whose reputation eclipsed her talent? Or as all of these at once? Perhaps that is the real legacy of Faye Dunaway, that she cannot be contained by a single narrative. In the diam glow of her study, she contemplates this paradox. Outside, the city continues to manufacture new legends, but within these walls, she guards the fragile, stubborn ember of her own. The world will argue, distort, and debate. They will call her tragic, brilliant, cruel, divine. But in the end, the very fact that they cannot agree is proof of her impact. Legends are never simple. They are fault lines, fractures, contradictions. And so, even as the world prepares to mourn her, Faye Dunaway endures, not as a saint, not as a monster, but as something far more human. A woman who dared to burn too brightly, too fiercely, in a town that only pretends to love fire. In the end, no biography can capture the full measure of a life. For Faye Dunaway, the question is not whether she will be remembered, she will, but how? Will history inscribe her name among the titans of Hollywood, celebrated for artistry and courage? Or will it flatten her into caricature, remembered more for scandal than for craft? The tragedy and triumph of her story is that both answers are true. Faye has lived as a paradox from the very beginning. Born into modest means, she transformed herself into one of the most dazzling stars of her generation. Yet, the very qualities that elevated her, her precision, her ferocity, her refusal to compromise, also branded her as difficult, a label that shadowed her for decades. She was loved for her beauty, feared for her intensity, and punished for daring to demand what male colleagues received without question. In this, she is both singular and emblematic, her life a mirror of Hollywood's contradictions. As she sits in her quiet home, candlelight flickering across walls adorned with photographs, she knows the world will one day reduce her to headlines. Some will call her a legend, others will call her tragic, but neither word is sufficient. She is both and more. She is the echo of 1,000 performances, the sharp intake of breath when Evelyn Mulwray whispers her final confession, the furious laughter of Bonnie Parker on a doomed ride, the steel-eyed command of Diana Christensen turning television into blood sport. These moments remain, suspended in film, untouchable by time. They are her defiance against erasure. The public will argue long after she is gone. Critics will publish essays dissecting her choices. Documentaries will juxtapose her brilliance with her volatility. Students in film schools will freeze-frame her expressions, searching for the secrets of her technique. Fans will post tributes online, flooding timelines with her most iconic lines. Detractors will revive stories of clashes and tantrums. But in the collision of these narratives lies the truth. She mattered. She unsettled, provoked, enchanted, terrified. She forced the world to look closer. What does it mean, then, to live a life defined as much by controversy as by art? For Faye, perhaps it means she never allowed herself to be reduced to one dimension. She was not safe, not gentle, not pliant. She was alive in every sense, unyielding, flawed, magnificent. If that is tragedy, then it is also glory. And so the question lingers, unresolved. Will her name be spoken in tones of reverence or regret? The answer depends less on her than on those who inherit her story. Every generation will choose its own. Faye Dunaway, the rebel, the diva, the genius, the exile. Each version is partial, incomplete, but together they form a mosaic of a woman too vast for simplicity. In the darkness, the candle gutters low. She leans back, closes her eyes, and allows the silence to wrap around her like a shawl. Outside, Los Angeles continues its endless performance, birthing and burying stars with equal indifference. But here, in this room, one truth endures. Faye Dunaway has already outlived the industry's forgetfulness. Her image is imprinted in the fabric of cinema, her name etched into its history, her contradictions preserved like fossils in amber. When the final curtain falls, the world may try to write her story as either triumph or tragedy. But perhaps the most honest epitaph is this: she was unforgettable. And in the end, that is what every star longs for. Not perfection, not even love, but remembrance. The question remains. The debate will rage, but the legend will never dim.